Hey everyone, I'm Amethescent, and I just made a game in 7 days for a game jam. So, without dawdling for much longer, allow me to take you on the journey that was my game development process. Day 1. Unlike the last jam, I was very aware of the day the jam would start. So, that morning, I waited in anticipation for the theme to be announced. And when it did, I immediately set to work. The theme was Out of Bounds, and it wasn't long before I started to develop an idea of what I wanted to do. For some context, my brother's birthday was around the jam, so I made the game with him in mind, and that influenced choices like the hand-drawn art and the quote-unquote simple and sweet feel. Whether I pulled it off? I suppose that's for him to decide. When I didn't immediately have an idea of what to do for my project, I turned to my game ideas document, which I had filled with ideas for video games that I've had over the past year or so. I combed through this document, looking for something that captured the simple and sweet mood I wanted, while still aligning with the theme. I didn't have much faith that I would find anything, though. Sweet and simple isn't usually something I go for with my games. I like them to be deep, meaningful, and maybe a bit sad. Okay, maybe a lot sad. But that's beside the point. I was pleasantly surprised when I came across a game where you play as toys, a teddy bear and a doll. It wasn't much, but if anything is sweet and simple, it's a teddy bear and a doll. Although I was surprised that was all there was to it. Usually, the ideas I write down are more detailed than that. And I don't even remember writing it down in the first place. But I didn't have time for that. I needed to come up with a plot and connect it with the theme. I thought about making the game about friendship, or more specifically, about helping someone. Since toys usually belong to young children, I thought it would be nice if the toys you played as belonged to a little girl. And throughout the game, they'd have to help her with something. But in order to do that, they'd have to reveal themselves as sentient, which was not allowed. Bursting with inspiration, I spent the rest of the day developing the idea and coming with a complete story. The game would be about 2 toys helping their child overcome her grief over her best friend moving away. This child would be under the false impression that she wasn't allowed to be sad, that she had to grow up. Not only did this cause her to become distant from her parents, but it also caused her to discard all her quote-unquote childish things, including her stuffed bear and doll. The toys would realize this and come out of hiding. Then they would spend the entire game helping the child and convincing her that it's okay to be sad, and that she didn't have to worry about growing up so fast. Alongside plotting the entire game, I also finished the designs for the doll, the teddy bear, and the young child named Susie, Toby, and Emma. And at the end of the day, I was feeling very proud. Never have I ever plotted a game so quickly. It usually takes quite a few days. I felt on top of the world, and like I was ahead of the game, literally. But then, I realized something. My game idea, the one I had spent all day making, the one that I was so proud of, it barely fit the theme at all. I thought about pushing through anyway, despite this. Plotting has always been my least favorite part of the creative process for me, because of how difficult it was. But if my game didn't fit the theme all that well, I doubted I would get placed very high when my game was judged. And so, I discarded everything but the art. Day 2. Waking up, I was not happy about having to start over. Coming up with ideas that I like is hard, and fleshing them out completely is even harder. I didn't want to have to go through that again, but I couldn't really continue with the game until I did. And so, I pressed on. I struggled a lot with coming up with something new, and spent the better part of the day racking my brain. About halfway through the day, the concept of dreams crossed my mind. I wasn't immediately drawn to the idea, but after searching nightmare on Pinterest and scrolling through the results, a practice I sometimes use in hopes of jump-starting my imagination, I stumbled upon this image, and it was exactly the spark that I needed. I imagined Emma in her nightmare. Ensnared in twisting vines and thorns, she would be bound by her own grief. As the player, controlling the doll and teddy bear, your goal would be to free Emma and guide her toward overcoming her grief. And you would do that by dispelling the vines. What is it that caused Emma's grief, you ask? Well, you're just going to have to play the game to find out. I shouldn't spoil my own game after all. With this newfound inspiration, I started to plan the game and plot Emma's backstory, and I ended up reusing some of the ideas from the previous plot that I had. For the art aspect, I started creating the base layer for 2 of the sections of the map, as well as the walking animation for one of the toys. This was the first time I've ever made a completely hand-drawn game. I thought it would be so much more difficult than what I'm used to making with pixel art and tile sets, but it was about the same in difficulty. I really shouldn't be so surprised given my background in art. The point is that I was able to get a lot of art done during the jam time, and finally, I began implementing some basic gameplay. Essentially, just the player movement, map implementation, and adding collisions to what I already had in the game. Day 3. Day 3 was the day where all my training started to show. The last jam I participated in was only a few weeks ago. It was the first time I've ever made a game in Godot, and I learned a lot. However, it wasn't enough. I knew that this game jam would be coming up soon, and I knew that I wanted to make another game in Godot for it. So I took it upon myself to train for it. I learned some basic to intermediate GD scripts, which wasn't all that hard given my prior experience with Python. I also taught myself how to use the ever-useful @export and @tool keywords in my scripts to allow me to use my code to its full potential. For my last game, I didn't make use of these and ended up with many unnecessary scripts and scenes. And it hurt to do that because, from what I know about programming, optimization is key. It's not practical to have 5 different scripts that basically do the same thing. It takes up space. And boy was I glad that I knew about these keywords when I made this game. This game was much more complicated to code than my previous game. If I hadn't done any of my training beforehand, it would have been nearly impossible to make it. The number of scripts and scenes that I used would have surely quadrupled. But anyway, on day 3, I worked on some foundational scripts for a few key scenes. I coded a system for transitioning between areas and interacting with objects, naming the scripts Enter Area and Interactable respectively. Taking a break from that, I took some time to work on the first half of the intro sequence of the game. I created all the art, scripted it, and implemented it completely into the game. I also tried my hand at the code for the left area of the map, but ran into some trouble. After a couple hours of trial and error, I decided to put it off until the next day. Day 4. The problem I was having with the left area of the map had to do with switching out objects. What I wanted to have was an interactable that could be replaced after performing a certain task, but I was unable to figure out how to do that for quite a while. The code I had for a basic interactable wasn't enough. I tried to create a bunch of different additions to it to allow for swapping. The problem was that this problem was specific to that section of the map and wouldn't be needed for other sections. But eventually I came up with a solution. And that solution was just to create a manager script that would control which object got switched, when it got switched, and what it got switched to. And this was much easier. I was very proud that I was able to come up with such a solution. And this way, I could still keep my interactable script very general. After overcoming that extremely stressful roadblock, I finished off the rest of the left island. Starting out with creating a script and scene for an item that could be picked up, I made it so that you could destroy these statues, but only once you got a hold of a hammer. And you could only interact with a special statue after destroying all the others. And after doing all of that, the vines disappear. Then I wrote and implemented all the story elements for this section and coded it so that once you complete everything, leaving and returning won't reset your progress. And finally, I finished off the intro sequence, the art for the right islands, and the main menu screen. Days 5 and 6. On days 5 and 6, I finished off the code, art, and story for the right and top islands. The right island was by far the most difficult to create, and it completely exhausted me. On that island, there are 3 different puzzles that I had to set up and configure, and it took absolutely forever. Not necessarily because the coding was super difficult, but because of the sheer amount that had to be done for that island. Suffice it to say that I was very relieved to be done with it. I ended up being so exhausted from working on that island that when I came up with a concept for the top island, I purposefully went for something that would be very easy and simple to implement. I'm not sure how easy it is to tell that I kinda gave up for that island, but I still think it turned out fine. I also added in the final cutscene and made it so that once you enter an area, you can't leave until you've accomplished the task of that area. As much as I dislike limiting the player, I didn't have much of a choice. Leaving the area mid-task would reset everything upon re-entry, and I was too burnt out from coding to fix it any other way. Regardless, it still worked. Finally, I created the walking animations for Toby, as well as his AI that would allow him to follow the player around. Then I added him into every relevant scene and cutscene. I managed to get everything about him working except for his idle animation. Day 7. Fortunately for me, the major aspects of the game were already done. All I needed to do at that point was polish and testing. Unfortunately for me, this would take the entire day. In the art aspect, I drew all the different expressions that the characters would display throughout the day, and I created some CGs, or computer graphics, for the final cutscene, as well as the end art, 4 in total. On the coding side of things, I fixed the code for the bear follow animations as well as some other errors that came up. I named the game Renewal, added as much music and sound as I could within the time limit, and spent a lot of time fixing various errors. Then I tested. Whenever I make games, I like to be thorough with getting rid of any errors. So, when I playtest my game, the goal is to go through it completely without finding any errors. And if I do, I fix the error and start from the beginning. It's extremely tedious, but I'm glad that I did, as I didn't have time to get anyone else to playtest. It really allowed me to iron out many of the errors. And with that, I submitted it, breathing a sigh of relief. And the result? Out of the 21 games that were submitted to this small local jam, I got 2nd place, and I'm happy with that. Very happy. I worked hard on my game, and that hard work paid off. Everyone I know who's played it has only had good things to say about it. I'm very proud of the result and how much I've grown since my last jam. Again, the game is called Renewal, and you can find it on itch.io. I'll leave a link in the description for the game if you're interested. It only takes around 20 to 30 minutes to play and can run in your browser. It would mean a lot if you checked it out and let me know what you think. But anyway, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching, and please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already to see more of my content. Take care and farewell.